What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Eva Yazhari. You could check her out. A couple sites, beyondcapitalventures.com, and her book, which is The Good Your Money Can Do. It's thegoodyourmoneycando.com. Before I formally introduce Eva, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. It's just, it's part of the top author series here. Some interesting books. We were talking about Payam Zamani, who wrote Crossing the Desert. An amazing story, and there's overlap with Eva and her family too with this story. So check it out. That episode has some incredible, kind of heartbreaking stories actually in it. And some other interesting ones. Kind of on the investment or business side, Vern Harnish wrote Scaling Up. That was a really good one. And Michael Gerber, who wrote The E-Myth. And then Chris Voss, who wrote Never Split the Difference. That was also a great one. So check those out. Another fan favorite is Gino Wickman, wrote Traction. So check them out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect their dream relationships and partnerships. We do it in two ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution and production. My background, Eva, is I studied biochemistry as a chiropractor, but I started podcasting over 15 years ago, and that turned into a separate business by accident. I never set out to have people and help them with their podcast. And number two, we're an easy button for a company. Their company's gifting. We make gifting, staying top of mind to your clients, partners, prospects, and even from a culture perspective, people send to their staff on a regular basis. And you just give us a list of the people. We'll do everything else, curate the gifts and put your branding on and everything. We kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free to build amazing relationships. For Eva, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways on how I can give to my best relationships. I found no better way than profiling the people I admire on the podcast and sending them sweet treats in the mail. So anyone out there, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I'm super excited to introduce Eva Yazhari. She's an experienced investor, author, advocate for conscious capitalism, and as managing partner of Beyond Capital Ventures, she leads early stage investments in East Africa and India, focusing on essential sectors with the potential to impact millions. We'll show the website. Their investment portfolio spans over 50 equity and 9 debt deals, reaching more than 100 million customers and championing equitable ownership for all founders. She has a very interesting background as well. Began her career on Wall Street as vice president at Entrust Capital, managing over $5 billion in investments. And she now brings that expertise to mentoring founders and scaling purpose-driven companies. As I mentioned, she's the author of The Good Your Money Can Do, and she also co-hosts the Beyond Capital podcast, where she features global impact leaders. Eva, thanks for joining me.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
We'll get into it. The interesting part of your background too is I don't know if this is the opposite, but your parents were both artists, and it's interesting that I don't know. What would you consider your path versus their path? How would you compare it?
Yeah, I love that question. Number one, when your parents are artists and you walk around, you grow up in New York City and you go to the galleries as a child, even though you hate it when you're there, when you're 5 or 6 years old, you really get to develop an incredible eye. So art is a big part of my life. It's definitely a happy place and a place of relaxation for me. But I think, my parents were in the pursuit of creative expression. And while I became a mathematician, and I am an only child, so I was like the singular focus of all of their time and resources, treated like another adult at times, quite independent, very precocious. They let me go into Manhattan, even though I grew up in Staten Island, in eighth grade on my own. I mean, imagine letting your daughter do that. I have a daughter. I'm not sure I would myself. So they gave me the tools of deep self-confidence and also the modeling of what it looks like to look for creative expression. And I just took it in a different direction. I went into investment banking. Didn't particularly love that for me. I think there's a really important role in the world for bankers, and people really love that and make great careers. I then moved into kind of private equity and hedge funds primarily, and I loved the fund business, but it was because Entrust Capital was so entrepreneurial. However, because my father also grew up in Africa, I thought a lot. I couldn't get the itch to invest in emerging markets out of me. And that's where the real nexus of creative expression and investment came into play. So I became a VC in 2011 and started investing in emerging markets using my Wall Street skills.
What did the hours look like in investment banking?
Well, it's funny because I started out in the night investment banking intern program. So I went to Barnard College, which is Columbia University's all-girls school. And as a mathematician, everybody assumes that you're quantitatively oriented, which I am, that you would be good at finance. And so I got offered this position to go from 5 p.m. until about midnight and work alongside the analysts. But I was leaving at midnight and the analysts were staying. And so they were probably there until, 3, 4 a.m., depending on, what type of project they were working on. And I really got a flavor of what those hours were like. And let's just say they were brutal.
At what point do you decide, you're loving it, it's entrepreneurial. What point do you decide, okay, I need to do my own thing?
Well, it came with a little bit of a personal change. So my husband was running a Swiss business, and we had to figure out how to combine our lives in this personal change. And I ended up moving to Switzerland. I mean, I grew up in New York City. I love New York. It's not going anywhere for me. But for me, I was looking for a little bit of a shake up in my location. And Lehman Brothers had just gone bankrupt. The firm I was working at was great. I was advancing, but it just made sense for me to kind of make the leap. And when I got to Switzerland, I've said this on record before, the Swiss aren't terribly entrepreneurial. And so I had to look for something that allowed me to keep the creative expression part of being in finance. And that's why I launched my own firm. And I did that with the knowledge that there were really undervalued opportunities. And that's what I get up in the morning for every day.
Eva, I'm gonna go ahead, if someone's listening to the audio, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up right here, Beyond Capital Ventures, so we can look around here. But just talk about Beyond Capital Ventures and what you do. I know you just mentioned undervalued opportunities and emerging, and obviously conscious leaders. Talk about Beyond Capital Ventures.
Yeah, so we invest in two of the largest emerging markets. We call this the future of global growth because 53% of the world's population growth in the next 10 years will occur in India and Africa. Africa already will have the world's largest youth population, and India already has the world's largest working age population. And there are a number of other demographic tailwinds that support our investment thesis. You rightly pointed out conscious leaders. What are conscious leaders? They are leaders who are thinking about all stakeholders. Let's just say that, the businesses we are investing in are not enterprise SaaS. This isn't a playbook of, build a software that can be acquired by a large tech company and make billions of dollars. We're investing in need to haves that are in the healthcare, fintech, and mobility, and sometimes ag tech spaces. And we're doing this because the rising middle classes and the next kind of consumer classes are lacking access to quality products and services in these areas. And so the conscious leaders are important because in order to operate in a very kind of, challenging operating environment, you've got grid unreliability at times. You've got crossing borders if you're an African business scaling across multiple countries. These are not insurmountable challenges, but they do require a leader who's willing to navigate. And conscious leaders are always thinking about their customers, their employees, and their shareholders, but then they're also thinking about the bigger picture, the community around them, the government as a stakeholder, maybe even the climate as a stakeholder and how that could negatively impact their business. So conscious leaders are just a way for us to evaluate whether the leaders are really in the game to win. And one of the other things that's important for us is that we're looking for leaders who are in love with the problem and not in love with the solution. Because if they're in love with the solution only, they will die with that solution. Whereas if they're in love with the problem, they'll be really willing to find the right solution. And that's a really important part of our work.
I'd love to hear, what the criteria are, right? You mentioned some categories, right? Health tech, fintech, ag tech. At what point are they in their business where I guess some of your criteria there? And I do want to mention it reminds me of I had a guest, Chris Ategeka, one of the most impressive people I've met. And one of the things he was doing, they were creating bike ambulances because one of his
Mm.
siblings died on the way to the hospital, and it inspired him because they had to walk. There was no transportation where he was in Africa, so he started getting used bike parts and creating these bike ambulances. It was just really inspiring. So, but I'm curious, yeah, some of the criteria that you look at.
So we invest seed to Series A plus. So I would categorize that as early, but that doesn't mean pre-seed where we're just getting a business plan or an idea or a pitch for something that doesn't have revenue. So all of the companies that we invest in need to be post-revenue. We also need to have some element of product market fit. Within that business. Of course, you already mentioned kind of our sectors and our geographies. And then we evaluate for conscious leaders in the beginning of our investment process. But one other area that we're very focused is really at post product market fit is the kind of ability for a business to add up to profitability at the unit economic level. So, can this company not just grow? Can it actually become net profitable? And when? And that's very important for us because we don't actually have the same free flowing tap of capital that Silicon Valley has. Available to us in our markets. While India does have a very thriving VC ecosystem, I mean, we know that the capital that flows through the US is it's one of the largest markets in the world. And therefore, our companies need to work a little harder to have access to equity capital and sometimes have great access to debt capital, but it depends on what they're using it for. And so we really want to make sure that they can reach profitability. And in some cases, they actually don't need to raise equity post a Series B round, for example. So that is one of the key criteria to think down the road. And then finally, one of my colleagues says this really well. He says exits start on day one. So when we are looking for a business, we are immediately thinking, who is the acquirer? Can this company IPO in India? Because we know that a number of our businesses will be able to go that route. Or, is this a company where a larger stakeholder or kind of follow-on investor will help us have a secondary sale? Like, how can we create value, financial value, which comes along with strong purpose and impact hand in hand for our limited partners?
Is there, I'm sure it's all over the map, right? With where they're at in revenue and product market fit. Is there a low end to that? We're like, listen, at a minimum, you need to be here for us to kind of just think about this is a fit.
At the seed stage, we do see companies that are below a million ARR in Africa. However, in India, we have a number of businesses at seed stage that are already there. The two markets are complementary, but they are also very unique and different, which is why they support each other in one diversified portfolio. So the answer is, as you say, it is a little bit all over the place because it depends on geography and sector. But I'll tell you, if the answer is you have tens of thousands of dollars of revenue, it's not the right stage for us. I mean, we've also grown into a firm which can select our deal flow. And so we are very cautious about models that haven't been able to generate some elements of virality where they can then, have at least $250,000 of annual revenue at like the super earliest stage. And typically we've seen around 500 at the seed stage in Africa. And then in India, it doubles.
You talked about why emerging markets is pretty obvious, right? And then undervalued opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, Debt fund. We were talking before we
Yeah.
hit record on debt fund. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that?
Yeah, let me double click on undervalued opportunities for one quick second, because to your prior question, it's not just level of revenue, it's also what's the valuation. And what makes us say no a lot of the time is the valuation is too high. And so the average in one of our last venture funds, the average valuation across the entire portfolio was $18.5 million, which is half of the Series A valuation of US venture-backed businesses. So even though the companies are kind of, in some cases, we've done Series B, so there's sometimes a little later stage in that average, we are able to find undervalued opportunities with very large total addressable markets. And that is what we're really looking for. And we will say no if the valuation is too high. But absolutely, on the debt fund side, our name is Beyond Capital strategically and tactfully because we are focused on providing more than money to our portfolio companies. As you're scrolling here, you'll see faces of our founders rather than just logos. You here on this podcast, Dr. Jeremy, you're trying to bring forth the relational approach. We are doing exactly the same thing. We are investing in human beings that are creating solutions. In other words, creative expression of solutions around problems. And so, when it comes to one of the offerings that we've provided to our founders, we did put together a debt fund and we successfully closed that debt fund on June 30th. And why that's really important is because while there are, shops that have venture debt, mostly in the US, our founders don't really have access to bank debt or even venture debt in the same way that US companies do. And so we've been able to provide really important working capital loans, bridge loans, as well as even regulatory requirement loans. And we've been able to generate a really strong IRR for our investors in doing this and build a track record with no kind of impairments to businesses, but still provide this critical credit that is so important to the lifeblood of early stage businesses.
Let's talk about a few of these here. We
Yeah.
see Ampersand. Talk about their
Yeah.
company. What are they doing? And I'm curious, how did you meet these people?
Yeah. Well, we have an office in Nairobi staffed by two incredible individuals, one of which is Christophe de Montiel, who runs our office. South African individual who's lived in Nairobi for a while. So we meet our companies really through the kind of 150 sourcing and co-investment partners that we have in not only Nairobi, but in Delhi and Bangalore, where we have presence as well. Ampersand is a really great business. It's East Africa's leading e-mobility company. So when we think e-mobility in the US and Europe, we think Tesla, we think, electric cars, we think Waymo. The reality is the way most people get around in emerging markets is on two-wheelers. And so Ampersand created one of the first electric two-wheelers on the African continent. But going back to the in love with the problem and not the solution, this company is a perfect example of that. And here's why. They not only created the bike, but they started to develop a better battery. And then they realized that the rider doesn't have a place to charge that battery at home. Just like, you and I may have a charging port or plug it into the wall. That access is not the same where we invest. And so they created a battery swap network. And that's the key innovation of this business. They were so in love with the problem that they were almost willing to pivot to being an infrastructure energy company. And now over half the revenue of this business is coming from their from their battery swap network. And why that really matters is because other bike manufacturers can also plug their bikes through this network. So can their bikes can have battery swaps through this network. So the company has quite diversified revenue. One other thing that I will say about this company that's really surprised us is while this business is a low carbon footprint company and is also riding the tailwinds of the Rwandan government outlawing internal combustion engine bikes as of the beginning of this year. So they've banned the new bikes on the road. This business has realized that their riders are not motivated by climate change. Their riders are motivated by cost savings. And the rider is saving 50% vis-a-vis regular ice bike. And that is kind of the beauty of this model is like changing behavior is not a barrier for this company. And to boot, the battery swap stations are sitting in gas stations in Nairobi and Kigali, where the company operates. So the rider doesn't even have to change where they're going to get fuel for their daily rides.
This is great. No, I love
Yeah.
it. And then let's look at, well, we'll pull that up. Any others from East Africa, and we'll talk about India in a second. Any other interesting companies we should
Well,
mention? I mean,
I,
people could check out
I,
the website. We're looking at beyondcapitalventures.com/portfolio. You can see CarePoint, Cinch, Eden Care,
you
Kasha.
know,
Yeah.
let's talk about La Paire quickly. I'll run through it quickly. La Paire is what we call the Warby Parker of Africa. It's a business that effectively provides access to corrective lenses because so many people in emerging markets have vision issues, but do not have access to getting glasses and being able to see clearly. And this company's also been able to value engineer glasses. In fact, our Africa investment lead wears their glasses and don't tell Warby Parker, but vis-a-vis Warby Parker glasses, they're much more durable and they last longer. And he was really, really happy with his pair, which cost $20 for the like premium model. And what's great about this business is that they've scaled to 7 countries and they have 99 in physical locations, largely in Francophone Africa. It's a very kind of copy paste operational. Operationally heavy business of opening brick and mortar shops. But I think what's fascinating about it is just to show like the low hanging fruit. This is a business that we do believe we can have a very strong return in because there are players who want access to being able to sell to this next wave of consumers. And La Paire has been able to capture that demographic.
Love it. I could spend all day just going through each of these companies, but this is really fascinating. But let's talk about India for a second.
Yeah, I
Which
wanted to
which
run.
companies should we mention here? Maybe Lel 10
Yeah, I
first.
mean, it's hard. It's hard to pick the favorites, but let's talk about Lal 10. I mean, I think everybody knows that there are issues with manufacturing in China, whether it's now tariffs, which we didn't even expect when we originally invested, or it's, just kind of issues around what else comes with manufacturing in China and looking for alternative sources. So what this business does is it allows manufacturers and not only textile businesses but also home goods companies like Walmart or even kind of larger retails of clothing to have access to a manufacturing base in the world's largest democracy.
Yeah, you can see
Um,
Walmart, Levi's on this map.
Correct, correct,
Yeah,
correct. Pepe Jeans, a very old school throwback brand. They make GOT certified shirts for them. But what the key innovation is there are a lot of manufacturers across India. They're just not connected via technology. So this business is a cloud factory. So let's say the Walmarts of the world, they place their order for their sustainable t-shirts in their private label. And the job of LOL 10 is really to connect the company's order to the manufacturers and ensure quality and help be that kind of layer of quality control. And so this is a really interesting business because it's enhancing an existing system. And that is absolutely one of the themes. We like enhancement models versus replacement models. It's also making something that's informal, like really small workshops of sewing machines or people doing embroidery and taking that to the next level and making it much more formalized.
Let's choose another India one.
Yeah, I would love to tell you about Clinic if you just scroll down. So, Clinic
Awesome.
is one of our more recent investments. We call it the One Medical Group of India. It's a company that is making healthcare affordable and accessible for what we call the aspirational Indian. So, think about like the plumber or the more blue collar worker. That person really doesn't have access to private health insurance that works for them. They have access to government hospitals, which are, I've been investing in healthcare in this country since 2009, which are largely unreliable. I mean, there are certain ones, there's certain certification of Indian government hospitals that are excellent, but not everybody has access to that. Those are in the main cities. And so Clinic is looking to create not only health clinics, but they also have a subscription model. So not dissimilar from your One Medical Groups. And they provide access to inpatient health insurance. So what you can get is health insurance for your kind of catastrophic coverage because coming to a clinic actually doesn't cost very much. It's affordable, it's quality. But what you really need to be insured for is when you have a heart attack. And that's Clinic also sells those health insurance plans. So the company has multi-revenue streams in order to be able to add up to a very successful business that can grow and scale. They also have a proactive, more kind of preventative healthcare way of working with their patients as well that is really catching on, and they will also start to have telemedicine. And this is another company, so it's interesting. I'll share one more thing with you, which is one of the themes in our portfolio is that we do in India have a number of husband and wives running businesses. It's actually quite common. So there are two in the portfolio. Fresher is run by a husband and wife, and Clinic is as well.
That makes for an interesting dynamic. But yeah, healthcare, I mean,
Family business.
there's so much. I don't want to get started with the healthcare in the US, but yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there for improvement for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about your book.
Yeah.
And maybe start with no investment is neutral.
Sure. You know, I'm as you know, I grew up in New York. I didn't have the keys to finance. I grew up in Staten Island. Like if you read Colin Jost's book, you'll basically get to know my own upbringing and it's quite hilarious. But I realized when I learned the language of finance that like in sitting at dinner tables with people that had tremendous amounts of wealth and large portfolios, that there was like something missing. And what was really missing was the fact that truly no investment is neutral. Like when I buy something or I invest in something, there is a ripple effect. I'm placing my energy on that company. I'm placing my energy on that theme. I'm placing my energy in that country, whatever I may be investing in. And when you know that, you kind of can't unknow that. And I think it becomes a life philosophy. It's a really powerful discussion, in my opinion, to start thinking about whatever your values are, whatever they are all of your resources lined up with your values? And to know that you can do that. In other words, you are powerful enough to be able to say, my spending decisions matter enough for me to line them up with my values. My investment portfolio matters enough for me to line it up with my values. There are opportunities. And I just see this as the abundance mindset. This is a way of thinking about what's possible for your money and realizing that wealth is also much more than money, and you can still make money and line up with your values. So that's the thing about no investment is neutral. It's like it's kind of the central theme of my book, but it's a message for everybody who wants to kind of forget about that. Like you can't absolve yourself from the fact that anything you put a dollar towards, including your savings account, has an impact. There's a trade on the other side. There always is.
How do you think about, I'll phrase this so you don't have to throw anyone under the bus specifically, but decisions you've made to not
Yeah.
make certain purchases from certain companies because of your values.
Yeah. Um, the lowest hanging fruit was deciding which ride share company to use. What's great about being American is we're spoiled for choice. So there's really no excuse but to line up with your values. I mean, if you don't think that the yogurt company is working for you, Chobani's done a great job of building an incredible business that works for a lot of people. So I'll give you kind of these affirmative examples. But for me, it was really important to realize like who's leading the company that I'm, sitting in the cars of, and every ride is earning revenue for this business. And I just decided to switch over to a company actually run by a friend of mine's husband called Lyft. And Lyft is the relational ride share company, and that's what I'm looking for in every single interaction. My life thesis is in twofold. It's to be relational in every way possible, and trust me, I'm a New Yorker. It doesn't mean I talk to all the drivers. It doesn't mean I small talk with everybody. But the second area is of my life philosophy is that the pie is not finite. When I'm winning, you can win too. This is not a race to the bottom. This is not a zero sum game. We can both actually win here. And that's my goal as an investor. And so that was one of the choices that I made, was to think about, where my money was going, and what type of leadership it was supporting. And I felt much better about making that choice.
Thanks for taking that in the positive direction. I don't know why my mind went to the negative, but on that,
Glass half full.
so what are some of the companies you do respect? You mentioned Chobani, Lyft. What are some of the other ones that you love to support?
Yeah. I think in the rise of B corporations, which I also write about in my book, it's easy. It's a little bit, there's low hanging fruit here. Yeah, you kind of can just you do the flip, as my one of my friends who's in marketing says. There's this flip over of the product, and you read what the ingredients are, and then you can also read like some of the other certifications that company has. And one of them may be B Corporation, which means that it is a company that's been certified to care about all stakeholders. I'll tell you that I also think about my investing very differently, and I have put some constraints around what I invest in. And I do personally only invest in female fund managers. Being a woman who worked on Wall Street myself, being a little bit appalled with the 2% of capital going to women out of VC, and also 2% of capital going to female fund managers. That's my criteria. It's not meant to be exclusive at all. As you can see, there are many male-run companies in my portfolio at Beyond Capital Ventures, but I've just decided with my money, this is my criteria, and I would love to empower everybody else to take a similar view about what their values are. But finally, I did want to share. I have a lot of love for the investors that have backed me. And this kind of falls into the same category as no investment is neutral. Firms like Ellevest, Montcalm, Blue Zone Advisory, and Conscious Endeavors have all backed me in my venture fund. And these are all firms that represent, hundreds of clients, and have put us out to all their clients and done their homework and due diligence because they believed in my investment strategy, and it fell into their thesis around no investment being neutral and what they wanted to support. And so I did want to shout those names out because I do think it's really important to recognize those that have made it possible for you to be where you are.
I love that. In regards to the book, the purpose for the company you do talk about in the book too. Can you talk about that
Purpose
for your,
purpose-driven
yeah,
companies.
purpose-driven companies?
Yeah. Um, so as you mentioned my podcast. And I think what I learned through that 4 season podcast, which may have a fifth season, we'll see, is I was able to interview 100 purpose-driven leaders. Um, and what I really learned was that the why and the intention is the glue for having purpose and running a business that can grow and sustain market cycles. I mean, it's no different than the way Warren Buffett invested in his career. He stuck to an investment strategy. He had a purpose, he had a why, and he did fantastically well. And so I think what's important to me is that I'm thinking a lot about leadership right now as a leader myself and growing my business. And what I've learned from all of the incredible entrepreneurs, founders that I've invested in, or that I've interviewed, is that having purpose is what fuels success. And that's very
What are
important.
some of the fan favorites here? I mean, we're looking
Oh,
here, Beyond Capital
so
Podcast. I mean,
many. Yeah.
I love the Lovebird Foods story
Yeah.
personally, but what are some of the fan favorites that we're looking at?
Yeah. I've had a couple of my own founders. You see Steve Biko, who built a fintech company. He's the African in the third row there.
Oh, right here, yeah.
Right below. Yeah. He's built a business that lends to small businesses in Africa and has a 98% repayment rate and really strong interest rates. If you go down, you'll see two people I really admire. Karen Eldad, who's my executive coach, who has a tremendous amount of purpose in working with her clients. And then also Ross Baird. Ross has figured out a way to offer investors access to real estate investments through the opportunity zone investment scheme and help to create better places for better communities, effectively, better places for people to live. And he's based in Atlanta. So he's a good one and he's a great communicator. And then you also pointed out the CEO of Lovebird Cereal. I live what I would call kind of a high performance lifestyle. I'm married to somebody with an autoimmune disorder. So we are a consumer of Lovebird cereal. But really, I love Parker's story because what he does is he realizes from the inside of big food what's not working. And he doesn't complain about it. He just creates something that works and that consumers actually want. And I love that about him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm partial to like food products. I'm always looking at discovering or looking at food products, and I like cleaner food products in
Right.
general. So you can see here, Lovebird. I was telling some people what I was eating, and they're like, "You should try Lovebird. I think you'd like." I like the grain-free cereals. There's
Mm,
Three Wishes is one of my favorites
yes.
too. Um, First of all, Eva, thank you. I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just
Please.
want to thank you for sharing your stories, your knowledge, and lessons. And there's just these even the little things that you're saying that I think are golden. So I'm gonna have to go back and listen to these some of the things, just like the things like, be in love with the problem, and some of those just to you, it's just rolls off the tongue, but it's pretty profound when I think about it. So I want to encourage people to check out beyondcapitalventures.com. You could check out the book. You can find it at the available bookstores, Amazon, and check out the website, thegoodyourmoneycando.com. My last question is just some of the mentors that have helped you in business throughout your career that we may want to just, maybe a lesson you learned from one of them.
Yeah. I like expanders. Um, as a kind of a phrase for people who inspire me because I think today in the podcast world you can actually learn so much from somebody that you don't know. Um, I love Melody Hobson of Aries Investments. She is I think she and I are really similar, and I connect with her drive, her ambition, but I also connect with her willingness to just be honest as a leader. and think about leadership from the lens of honesty. And I've learned a lot from her. I've also learned a tremendous amount from Emma Greed, who runs Skims and Good American and runs a number of the Kardashian brands. And what I love about expanders who are not in my industry is I take from their industry and reapply it to my industry, and that makes me better at what I do, and really resonates. And so she's also a fierce female leader who I think, is willing to say what a lot of mothers that are running companies don't, and I certainly relate to that. But finally, a little cliche, but I'm married to somebody who turns companies around when they have sometimes less than 6 weeks of cash left. And these are very large businesses, hundreds of millions of dollars of profit companies, or not necessarily in those times, but at one point they had hundreds of millions of dollars of profit and revenue. My husband has taught me a lot and has made me a better investor, because I just get to have the passenger seat to seeing what goes wrong in companies day in and day out. And it's made me a better board member. It's made me a better negotiator. It's made me a better investor. And I'm really lucky to have a true partnership with somebody that goes, beyond an incredible marriage and co-parenting, but really helps me see the world differently and is accretive to the value that I bring to my investors and to my portfolio companies.
Yeah. That could be a whole nother podcast episode. What are all the things that have gone wrong with these companies? So I'm
Let's
holding
do
back on
it.
asking that. But no, thank you. And I think you have your next book. It's called Expanders. I think there's like a whole topic of expanders. So I know it's probably like giving birth, like having a book, like,
No.
okay, I'm tired. I don't want to do another one for a while.
No.
So think about that one. But
So I actually think that I love that. I also think the title of my next book will be Emerging, and it's happening in the next 5 years. So we'll take it from there.
love it. Everyone check it out. BeyondCapitalVentures.com. Check out the book, The Good Your Money Can Do. We'll see everyone next time. Eva, thanks so much.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.